Welcome back to another episode of the School of Weird podcast, which is really exciting that we're joined today with Susan Drumm. Susan, how are you?
Good, doing well. I'm excited to be here with you.
Susan is one of my new friends. She's a thought leader, author, speaker, and change maker in the world. And I thought that today would be an amazing opportunity for us to drop into some of the stuff that was really intriguing to me around specifically the work she does with play and the work she does with the Enneagram and the inner child and all things that all of you know I'm passionate about, and the way those can unlock things in unsuspectful places like the workplace. So welcome,
Thank
Susan.
you.
All right. So give us a quick rundown. Like, how did you get to the point where you wrote a book, The Leader's Playlist, and you do this work with the Enneagram for fun? You've been in corporate spaces for a while now. How did you get here?
I have a pretty eclectic background. So a lot of times people look at my background, they're like, how did you get there? And I think part of it is discovering, well, what is my purpose in the world? What is my mission and what lights me up? And it started, I went to Harvard Law, but did not end up practicing law. I went right into consulting, BCG. So I figured out pretty early on, like law was not going to be the place that was going to light me up by any means.
Yeah.
But in law school, they teach you how to make finer and finer distinctions. And the use case for that is case law, right? This case applies, this case does not apply. I use that same skill just in terms of mindset and helping people really make finer distinctions about the way they're thinking and the way they're viewing the world. So from there, I went on to BCG, Boston Consulting Group, doing strategy consulting, went to NBC Television, doing as a master black belt in Six Sigma. Shoot me now. No.
Wow.
And then marketing and business development. And then went into, got a master's in acting from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. And it was through that, and that's 5 years post law school. It was through that experience that I realized, God, there's got to be a way I could bring some of the teachings that you learn as an actor back into business and into leadership. And that's when I got into leadership development 20 years ago.
I love that.
Well, that's how I
That's
got
awesome. Yeah. And so the thing that I thought was interesting was, were you a musician?
I wasn't a musician.
I did
music? Sing a little bit, but I've always had a special relationship
in the shower,
with music.
basically. Is this like a shower type singing type deal, or were you actually sang in public?
I sang more like high school chorale. And then when I went through this program, I did have to sing as part of it, but I was not a good enough singer to be on Broadway for sure. So my acting career was limited to film and television.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, so essentially you wrote this book, and I haven't got to read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. This Leader's Playlist. Yeah. I want to drop into that first, and then we'll kind of keep going down the rabbit hole. But what was your inspiration for that? And what's the essence of this like secret unlock you've discovered with me?
Yes, for sure. So this is the book, in case anyone's looking for it. It's called The Leader's Playlist, and it's how to unlock music and neuroscience to transform your leadership and your life. And what that means is there's two parts to it. The first part is about how our childhood wounds show up in our leadership today. And from all the work I've done, and I've coached some just extraordinary leaders, from billionaires to heads of state to Fortune 100 C-suite executives, just extraordinary people. And one of the things that I always saw is how they were reacting to things didn't have as much to do with what was really going on in the present moment. What their filter for what they wanted to pay attention to had everything to do with what happened to them way back in our formative years. And I got very curious about that, both for myself and my own personal growth journey, but also in their journeys, right? And how to switch that. So that was sort of the background. But gosh, these are deep-seated patterns. These are things that are, what I say is like a neural pathway that's like an 8-lane highway to hell, right? That if it's not working for you, right? And because it's grooved in so deeply. And what I found is that for my own personal use, to get off the old, what I call the old playlist, music was the fastest way to to interrupt that old neural pathway and create a new behavioral pattern. So I bring in research on music on the brain and how it lights up all regions of the brain, how they're using it in so many areas now for healing, from Alzheimer's patients to brain traumatic injury, because it allows those neural pathways to form more quickly. So I developed a process to be actually able to use music to make the changes that you want to make in your life more quickly, and even the most deep-seated changes like these old patterns.
Wow. I love that. And that's all in
And
the
that's
book.
all in the book. Yes. Yeah.
Jeez, for low price of $19.95 or something, probably, right? Maybe even $18.95 if Amazon's running a special. Wow, that's a lot. That's awesome. Congratulations on
Thank you.
discovering
Yeah.
that. Okay, so here's the magic question. In the boardroom, or you're working with these CEOs that think they've brought you in for leadership or to unlock whatever KPI they want to unlock, right? Do you actually go there with them as far as like get them to open up about their childhood? Is that a whole process for you?
If they're willing, we don't have to go there, but a lot of people find that helpful, right? So let me give you an example. Was working with this executive, Deborah, who was a chief marketing officer for a biotech company in the Bay Area, and she was getting feedback. And the reason she was working with a coach, because she was getting feedback that she was inserting herself in too many areas, right? Was trying to control too many pieces, wouldn't stay in her own swim lane enough. And from her
Yeah.
side of it, she's like, I'm chief marketing officer. I need to know what's going on in other avenues of the company. Makes sense,
Sure.
right? But what I was curious about was like, well, why was she getting this feedback and why was it so triggering to her? And I asked her to check into like when you get this feedback and when you're not included on an email chain that you think you should have, or you're not invited to a certain meeting, what happens to you? And so we're focusing on the present there, right? We're focusing like what's up for you presently. And for her, she's like, I just feel like I'm being left out, right? I feel angry and I'm feeling frustrated. And so then I say, well, where else in your life are you feeling left out and frustrated and angry? And she goes, well, actually, I can name a place in my personal life where my ex-husband now has the family home on the beach and I don't get to go there anymore. And when the kids are going there and I'm reliving all those memories, but I'm excluded from that, I feel the same emotion.
Yeah.
So we take that and we keep, I'm like, well, where else in your life? Where else can you remember? And what I'm hoping for people to see is that these types of things are actually patterns. They're patterns in your life. It's not a one-off. It feels like a one-off, but I can guarantee it's a pattern. And I think that's where my superpower is in pattern recognition and help people see the patterns. So we'll go back as far as you're willing to go. We don't have to go all the way back to childhood if you don't want to go there.
Wow. That's interesting. I see. I always love that type of vulnerability and that going deep on this human level in the workplace. I mean, obviously not everybody's ready for it. And then of course in the keynote space, which we both are in, it's a different balance, right?
Yes.
Because it's such a large room. And so you're not able to go that deep level one-on-one. And I always find that's interesting. One of the things I do in the middle of my keynote is I ask every single person in the room to look to their neighbor and tell them what they were into at 5, 6 years old. Not necessarily what did they want to be when they grow up. Some people know that. Other people, it's when they played make-believe, what did it look like? And it's this whole section in the middle of my experience that's about imagination.
I love it.
Because most adults have gotten to this point where they no longer identify as imaginative. But as you know, all 5, 6-year-old children identify it at a very high level.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that imagination, innovation isn't learned, it's unlearned. And that's become a theme for me. And that's a big part of the work that I do in helping people figure out why they can't unlock innovation or why they can't unlock creativity or unlock growth in new novel ways. And it's because they're stuck. And actually, before we get into imagination, we focus on what I call authenticity, which is getting honest about the things that are standing in the way and really starting to inventory what is it that's holding that back. And a lot of it boils down to fear of failure or this fear of like putting myself out there or fearing that I'm not going to be enough. Like when you get all the way down to it, it's basically shame/fear at the base of all this. Would you say?
Yeah,
It's
exactly. And
interesting.
that's,
I
in
love it.
fact, in the book, some of the old playlists are these I am statements, these beliefs that we have about ourselves, right? And so when I say playlist, I'm using it both figuratively and literally. So
Yeah.
if I am left out, that's a belief I have about myself. And here's the reality of that. That has actually a vibration to it. So we're all made up of vibration. Everything you see here, either if it's denser, it's a denser vibration, but so is music. And so that's why I'm using music for people to check into. Our emotional state has a vibration, and we can
Hmm.
actually use music, that's another vibration tool, to shift that to get to the place that we really want to be.
Now, do you play around with quantum physics at all? Or like, have you delved into
Yeah,
that rabbit
yeah,
hole? Or black hole, maybe?
yeah,
I don't know if it's a rabbit hole or if it's a black hole.
yeah, a bit of that for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's all part of it. That's the unexplainable relationship between that and like the same duality of the two sides of our brain, convergent, divergent thinking. And what I've found that's fun about most people that have the same calling that you and I have is that essentially we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to help people unlock maximum
Yes.
human
Yeah.
potential, right? And in organizations as a collective, what is possible when a collective is unlocked, moving in the same direction is limitless.
Hmm.
If, in most cases,
Yes.
it's beautiful,
Yes.
but it's not linear. It's not clean. It's dirty and it's weird, and that's where a lot of like I used to be all about why and figuring out why and the art of why and breaking why and the school of why and all this stuff. And I've gotten to this point now where it's like why is important and it's up there, but it's also kind of been like it's gotten this weird watered down effect where I'm realizing that there's a lot of work below why that has to be done to even answer why. Because nobody can just answer why because you don't know. It's a lot of it's not written yet. So you're always going to be guessing. But the best thing that I can be doing is figuring out what is originally was in me.
Hmm.
If I'm especially people get stuck, adults get stuck, they don't know which way to go. There's something about this reset that I think you are believe in the same thing is that if I go back to what was I before I thought I had to change
Hmm.
or before I thought I had to be something else, who was that Susan or who was that Frankie, right? And who was that Susan, by the way? Who was Susan at 5, 6 years
Oh
old?
my gosh, so much
What was
energy.
Susan into? What were you doing?
So much energy. I
Energy?
would say
Okay.
I was obsessed with playgrounds. Like my parents
Okay.
couldn't drive
Beautiful.
past a playground without me freaking out. In fact, they would have to go a longer route home because if I saw a playground,
So you wouldn't see it.
like I would go berserk. Um,
And what was your favorite thing about the playground?
just I loved the swings. I love it. Just to me was the same as Disney World, right? It's like this
Yeah.
place to turn upside down and go through a slide, and I think there was something about where I could get some of my energy out because I've always been a pretty high energy person. I have more energy than
Nice.
most people.
Yeah. I hear that. Are you neurodivergent by any chance?
Not that I'm aware of, although I would say to my, I
I'm in
don't
the
know
same
that I've
boat.
ever, well, actually, I did have this
I'm not
roommate.
diagnosed, but I can't imagine that I'm not.
Well,
Like,
I
I
don't
mean, I'm not
know.
on medication or anything, but
I have some
yeah,
strange
it's
things that, like, you know, bringing, and this part of this, I describe it as an Enneagram. So I'm an Enneagram type 7, which is the
oh, me
enthusiastic
too.
visionary, right? And so
Yep.
we're
I'm
able
the
to
same way.
bring things together in ways that other people can't see. Why am I bringing music and leadership? And I went to law school and consulting, and I brought it all together. That's usually a very
Hmm.
typical 7 trait, is to see the
Yeah.
connections between things that other people can't see.
Yeah. You're like, I like to call us mutants sometimes. We're like a hybrid or a mutant, depending on what day it is. Uh, it's not always as sophisticated to be a hybrid. So that's why I'm like, okay, maybe we're mutants. I was talking with somebody before this call. They were, Aaron Nip is one of my friends. I don't know if you know Aaron. He's in the business with us on the video and content side. But anyway, we were talking about this idea of some people are all hard and some people are all head, and usually picking a lane and going with that is like the way to go. And I was like, man, I gotta say, like, I've not ever been able to pick
Yes.
one of those
Yes.
lanes. I've had to do both. And I think for some people they can go all hard and some people they can go all ahead and then they can just kind of tag team together and make a partnership. But most of my partnerships have actually been inside of my body, and sometimes that's an 8 to 9 person different
Yep.
partnership. I don't know if you can relate, but yeah, I think that's the curse and the blessing of the 7
Yes.
Enneagram.
Yes.
Okay, so not everybody knows what an Enneagram
Yeah.
is. So give us the elevator version of what that is for those of the people that are watching, listening. What the heck's an Enneagram?
Yes, it is one of the most powerful tools for growth that I can outline to people. I am so passionate about this tool. Sometimes it gets lumped in with other personality assessments like DISC or Myers-Briggs, but it's very different than
Right.
those. Those tools are looking at behavior or what you do, but the Enneagram answers a different question, which is why you do something.
Yeah.
And I think the
Beautiful.
analogy is, as human beings, we think we can see 360 degrees like a chameleon, but we can't. We have a central vision and a peripheral vision. And where we point our focus of attention, that's what we see. But there's something behind our head we can't see, and that's the blind spot. And what the Enneagram does is illuminate for you what that blind spot is, how to work with it or work on it. But also, it's so powerful in a team setting because in the model of the Enneagram, it's showing you that there's someone else looking that direction naturally. And so if I keep arguing it's yellow and you keep arguing it's green, well, we never see each other's perspective. But if you start to learn this model and understand why that person's looking that direction, what gift they have to offer, and what you can learn from them, then the doors start opening up. So it really diffuses conflict on the team. It helps teams see how they could work with each other and collaborate more effectively. So you both grow individually, but the collective grows by understanding and creating more empathy with how people view the world and how it's different.
That's beautiful. Yeah, my sister's a huge fan. So she's a master's in psychology and is a therapist, and she is always sending me stuff on the 7s. And, I think she's a 6. I don't have them all memorized. She knows the whole family memorized by number. It's hilarious. But it is so profound. Some of those types of frameworks, like I would dream of making something like that. I've always talked about creating a Love Your Weird score. Which would be more of just like a 0 to 100, and it would score each person on their level of authenticity, imagination, and feeling like there's a sense of collective ingenuity at a company. And I actually probably am going to build this later this year where companies can actually give it to their employees, and then we can see how much impact from my Love Your Weird framework has impacted those scores as the year progresses, which I think would be a lot of fun, especially when you're starting to measure that impact.
Right. Because what we're doing.
Tell me how you.
Well, as part of that, if you think about the Enneagram, it's like love your weird, but love their weird too, right? As opposed to judging them for it.
What I've realized is that it's love your weird, love their weird, and love our weird.
Yeah.
It's kind of what it is, right? But loving your weird is kind of all inclusive, because it could be the company's weird that you're loving. It could be obviously the individual's weird that you're loving, and it could be the other person's weird, because they're all part of this collective if you will. Like it's all in the company. And I think a lot of people, when they see Love Your Weird, it started out just kind of as like this thing that I went through when I was going through my divorce, and I went to on-site and realized that a lot of my problems in midlife were coming from not loving my weird, or doing all these things to cover up the pain from childhood.
Yeah.
And all of our pain's different. And I remember there was an exercise where they said, draw your pain and then draw how do you wear your pain. And I drew this beaker because I used to be a guy that was always trying to do science and invent things and all that. And so I was this scientific kid that got bullied. Excuse me real quick. Let me see if I can get this out.
I'll take a sip too.
We'll edit it out. How are you doing? All right. I always have to remember to edit that stuff out.
No worries.
It's like, remember.
I know that feeling.
Let's see where we're in 1948. Let me make a little note. All right. Yeah. So for me, they had said, draw what your pain looks like. How do you wear it? And so I had that. And then I had this fear of financial insecurity because my parents grew up in a nonprofit setting, and we were always at the mercy of, donors and other people's benevolence and things like that. So it created this odd relationship with that fear, that where we were going to have a place to live and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. And my parents were in homeless shelters, which was beautiful to get to be a part of that as a kid. And it's made a lot of who I am today, but it doesn't change the fact that these two fears, I mean, pain, were there. And then I drew a business suit around it. That's how I wore the pain, and that's how I hid it. Is I just thought business suit will solve
Mm-hmm.
this. It's accepted. You can make money, so you don't have to have fear of financial insecurity. You can have power. You're not at the mercy of other people. And so I lived a lot of my early career in that space, and then had some real bottoming out as a result of
Yeah.
it, especially in my personal life. I'm a drug addict, alcoholic, got sober 15 years ago. So that's another part
Yeah.
of my journey. But all of that it's all interconnected in a way. And what I realize is that it all comes back to this baseline of like shame that didn't think that I was good enough as is, because weird isn't acceptable,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so let me be what everybody else thinks I need to
Mm-hmm.
be. And that has an expiration date, when you get into that level of, especially if you're good or halfway decent at people pleasing, at being what people need you to be, and at PR,
Yeah.
you can end up in a pretty dark spot over time.
Well, so much everything, what I've learned in the work that I've done is everything does come back to self-love. It's truly the place where you can't fully love another person unless you're always
That's
going to
right.
bring some wounds into the situation if you're looking for the other person to heal you. And what is it that you need to heal for you? So all of the work, I mean, I even
It's
have a
huge.
playlist called I Am the Love of My Life, of like learning to stop going external to get that and give it to me. Where am I withholding love from myself?
Yeah. Wow.
And that
That's
playlist has been
interesting because
hugely impactful, by the way.
that's so awesome. I really gotta have to get into that. I'm going to dive in. I'm the worst at having a stack of my friends' books that I still need to read. I'm like the worst. I'm guessing you have an
Yeah,
audio
try
version.
and I narrate it. So try the
Yeah.
audio version. And what's kind of,
Good. Yeah. I always do an audio version because that's kind of my
yeah,
favorite way to take it in.
yeah. What's
You
fun
could do it
about
on
it
while you're
is
flying or on the road.
you can I go into 9 short stories in it, and you can identify the one that seems closest to you or might resonate with you. And I have a QR code in there where you can download that person's old playlist and their new playlist, the actual music that they use to help shift and heal themselves.
Sweet.
So
And that's in the
you can
book,
help
the
create your
QR
own
code.
from and you
And what is it, like
yeah,
Spotify
from Spotify.
playlist?
Yeah. So it's connected to that. So
Wow,
yeah.
that's fun. That is so fun. I love that. Was that hard to make?
Uh,
Like put all that together
yeah,
or
to
not that
really
bad?
to think about well, I used these are amalgamations. What's the right word? Composite stories. I couldn't use the actual client stories. So I would, over the
Right.
years, I've coached so many that like I would sort of pull little bits and pieces together in a story and then
Exactly.
bring the music
And I
together.
feel like I was literally talking about that with my brand agent and my wife this morning. This idea of storytelling, and the the best stories are the ones that are adapted. If you think about the best movies are based on a true
Yeah,
story.
right.
They're not the literal
Yes.
actual story word for word, but they're the mostly
Yeah.
that. I'm realizing more and more like that's how the best way to approach creating just ridiculously great stories, unless they're about me, it's based on a true
Yeah.
story, like in the movies. Is that how you
Yes.
see that as
But
well?
let me just can you hear my landscaper just arrived? Can you hear that? Do you want me to tell them to stop?
I can hear it a little
Hold
bit.
on. Can I pause for a minute?
I don't know if anybody would notice. Yeah,
Okay.
pause, time out.
Okay, sorry about that because
Yeah, you're good.
the
No, I know the feeling, and it's so funny because like sometimes it's like you can't even really hear it, but I've been noticing more and more. I feel like I don't know if it's the softwares or whatnot. It's great. It's just getting better at picking up some of that
yeah,
nonsense.
and
So, well, there you
my
are.
dog
Okay.
was going to start barking. I was like, okay, let me just deal.
No, no. Let me just call this. No, that's good. Yeah, and I already know I got to cut it at another point, so this is fine.
Okay.
I definitely won't forget. All right, so let's see what do we want to pick up on. We were talking about based on a true story,
Mm.
and you were going to answer if you take that same kind of route with your keynotes, your body of work, your books, and things like that.
Okay, so wait, what was the question?
The question is, I have found that the best stories that are told in even nonfiction books and on keynotes and things like that are designed the same way a based on a true
Yeah.
story movie is. And I was asking you, do you come with that same kind of approach even with your nonfiction writing?
For sure. I mean, you have to balance this. You want to keep confidentiality, right? I don't want to tell people's stories, but that's why you have to take a bit of a creative license with it, and it's based on a true story.
Yeah,
Uh, but there's the inspiration is coming from the true story, and sometimes
of
you're like,
course. Yeah, so
"Wow,
it's more about anonymity almost for you than it is,
yeah."
trying to just come up with a making the story better.
Right, right. I mean, for my own story,
Okay.
I'm quite vulnerable in the book, and I tell my own story, but for others, right, that's not my place to tell.
That's right. Yeah, that checks out. That's exactly how I approach it too, as far as my own vulnerability, and I find that that's one of the greatest gifts we can give to anyone is showing them that vulnerability is not that big of a deal. And I mean, yeah, I'm not saying it's not easy, especially getting into it, but once you get practiced in it, it becomes natural. Like I'm always surprised now when I tell my stories or about different things, whether it be divorce or how that went down or addiction or losing my company in the mortgage crisis or whatever tragedy I'm talking about. People are like, "Wow, man, it's so vulnerable," and I've forgotten like that it's even vulnerable for people a lot of times to share the same thing.
Yeah.
And so we are creating that space where they can. And I always think that that's one of my favorite things, especially when I'm getting to work with a smaller group. It sounds like that's one of your passions
It
as well.
is. It is. I think ultimately being vulnerable is the greatest strength, right? You have to be very
Hmm.
strong to be vulnerable. So it's not a weakness at all. It's a sign of true strength to be able to share.
And it's, I think, especially if you're using it as a tool,
Hmm.
like if you're using it as a strategy and a useful tool that's designed specifically to help other people
Hmm.
with it,
Right.
like that's kind of what I find the intentionality comes in it, is that if the reason I'm sharing it is to try to help somebody else feel comfortable enough and safe enough to share theirs, share their
Yeah.
vulnerability so that they can ultimately grow the same way I have grown from sharing mine. That's kind of the cycle of true kind of like connected healing, that's been powerful. And a lot of that's work for me. I'm not a therapist or anything like that. A lot of it I've learned from working with hundreds of different drug addicts and alcoholics, going through that
Yeah.
journey of becoming sober, because you can get sober anytime you want. Staying sober is the hard part,
Hmm.
and it doesn't happen unless not only do you go through this like reckoning with the past and the patterns and everything else, but you also have to stay in a space where you're helping other people unlock their patterns, unlock their inventories, get their honesty
Yeah.
and their north. Get you and that you have to keep doing it. It's not something that you can just do once and then you're good. I think there's a real myth around that, right? That life is kind of like a ladder, or this journey of healing is a ladder, and it's really more of a series of circles where you're continually going around in it and then starting over. The more you can adopt that mindset of that it's a circle, not a ladder, the easier these processes are, in my experience.
Yeah, that's a fascinating analogy for it. I think the way I view it is these old patterns are are accessible at any time because we've created them in our brain. So it's a choice not to go down that path, and sometimes it requires the the awareness that we are starting to go down. Like, I'm on the 8-lane highway to hell, get me off, right? And
Yeah.
so my old playlist was I'm treated unfairly. That was a belief, and certainly you could look at my life in some ways not treated unfairly at all. In some ways, like, yeah, that was pretty bad. Where did my attention go? To the ones that were like, yeah, that was pretty bad. And
Yeah.
what I realized is that when things go wrong, that's a story that I could go to and tell myself, but it doesn't serve me. It does not
Hmm.
serve me at this stage of the game.
Right. Yeah, and it's about creating the new narrative from reframing it, right? So that one of my friends who I've had on the show and is a dear friend, Nikki Wilson, is a perception reframing doctor, and she's has all kinds of fun tools that she uses, voice recognition and
Yeah.
hand vibrations, and it's pretty awesome going through her experiences. But you know, everything boils down to trying to have a new thought around it. And when I say like the circle versus the ladder, it's more that's more of like the work that we do, and to re kind of frame this idea that like there's a destination,
Yeah.
right? So that I'm not surprised when I'm back at step one
Right.
for the next version of the same process, but then in this new space,
Yes.
which is funny because it's like I'm going up with my hands, but you're actually going down.
Yeah.
You're actually going deeper, and you're getting more in tune. But I think most of us, that's the myth of life, and especially like capitalism in America, is that everything is about up,
Right. It's
and the
very true.
truth is that the power is in down.
The the Enneagram, if some people know the Enneagram, but if you don't, that they probably don't realize that the Enneagram is actually a 3D diagram. When you see the diagram, it looks like it's two-dimensional, but it's
Yeah,
actually it's an ancient symbol called a Merkabah, and part of the growth path is going down in the
yeah.
path. So that resonates with me a lot.
That's interesting because you go, yeah, like when you're asked, because if you go up, you go to one number, and then if you go
Yes.
down, you go to six or whatever it
Yes.
is. Where do we go? Up to one, down to six, or something?
Well, no, to five. So first, it's working on five, which is kind of going down, which is more containment. So type sevens tend to be ones that are sort of out there, a lot of energy in the world, and not taking time to kind of go within, be present,
Is that five?
meditate.
The
That's
five
five.
is
The
within, right?
quiet specialist is
But don't we
five.
go to one for something?
Yes. So one then is the highest growth path, which is, and they have something to learn from you, and you have something to learn from them. So type one is the perfectionist or reformer,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that is, learning that to be more structured, really have integrity with your word, and finding the right outcome, because a seven can see multiple ways to do something, right? And so
Yeah,
balancing these
sure.
two things is part of that growth
I
path.
love that. So yeah, because the one is a lot more rigor
Yes.
than than we are traditionally. Are you by any chance not the firstborn
I
in
am
your
not a
family?
firstborn, but I have
Me neither.
sort of, because it started over.
What are you, second?
I'm last, but there's a big gap between my
Huh.
brother and sister. So I have some
Okay,
firstborn
like five
characteristics.
plus years,
Five, yeah.
5 years.
I have some firstborn
Don't
and
they
some
say it
lastborn
starts over?
characteristics.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and some only child, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't
yeah.
that play into it? Yeah. That's interesting. Yep. Because my brother is a one. He's the firstborn.
Mm.
I'm the secondborn, and it's crazy how much it fits. Like all the numbers in our family are just like dead on. It's wild, and it's funny. My wife didn't like her number the first time, so she retook the test. I think 2 or 3 times, and it's always the same number. You can't hack that test. She tried. It was so
Oh my
funny. I think
gosh.
she's a six, but I don't know what she wanted to be.
Well, it's so
Or
funny
but
because
now she's learned that it's like, look, now I think she sees the beauty in the six or
yeah,
whatever. But
yeah.
it is funny. She definitely tried to hack it because she was like, no, this isn't me. And so she answered the questions differently. I want to say she did at least 2 times, maybe 3.
Well, part of that is like what I've noticed after doing hundreds and hundreds of debriefs is that how you react is exactly what your type is, right? It's
Yeah.
almost uncanny. So I will tell you that most sevens are the most resistant to typing. They're the ones that are saying, well, I see myself in like a whole bunch of others. Why is that? Because sevens don't like to be boxed in. They don't want to,
Yeah, because I like
right?
3 too. What is 3? Believer or something? What is 3?
Achiever, the competitive achiever.
Achiever. Yes, I like 3 too. I like 7 and 3
Yeah.
myself.
But
You
it's
know.
it's interesting, I think, the way you are. Here's the phrase: you are who you are in everything you do, right? So how you respond to
Yeah.
your data is exactly in line with the type that you are. So
Yeah.
of course your type 6 wife has has
Yeah.
that resistance. But
Yeah.
there's no
That's
type
funny.
that's better than any other type. It's all about your level of self-development and growth within the type.
Oh, you're saying type 6 is the resistance one. Like they have a
No, I'm
resistance
saying
to
type
certain things.
7 is resistant to it, but type 6 is going to look
Type
at
7 doesn't want to be labeled.
they're going to look at what shows up as like bad because that's where their head
That's
goes,
what
like a
6 does.
judgment, right, about themselves and don't want to be,
Yes.
right, they'll be. So
Oh my God. Wow. So that's funny. Like step 6 is number 6 is really tied to that self-judgment type of
yeah,
space, right?
yeah,
Is that what you're, okay.
yeah.
Well, this is fun. I didn't know exactly what we were going to talk about today, but I feel like today was great. Was there something else on your heart, if you will, that you wanted to share before we wrap it up?
I just encourage people, if you haven't explored the Enneagram, please do. I've got a tool that you can take that is one of the most accurate assessments that you have called Enneagram Applied. And part of it is really
Fun.
applying it, right? So you just go to enneagramapplied.com and you can get the assessment, but more importantly, you get like the reasoning behind it and helps you create your own
Nice.
development plan from it, like what you can do with it.
So it actually takes it a step
Yeah,
further. And,
exactly.
and
And that's what we've really done
wow.
in our corporate work, which is apply the Enneagram. Like, how do I delegate based on my type? How do I give feedback?
And do you have everyone they take the test before you come in,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. And
Yeah.
then I can really
Awesome.
help them understand how do they develop executive presence based on their type? How do they influence and persuade based on type? So
Okay, so the
like that.
Enneagram actually helps you not have to go as deep to try to uncover their childhood or them try to get too vulnerable for you to start doing your work.
Exactly. We can get in, and then as we
Yeah.
peel back the onion, we can go there.
Yeah, like if they want to, if we, yeah, and then you kind of just feel it out. But the Enneagram already creates a really neat dynamic, I bet, and powerful dynamic for as you're doing the work with the group and they're learning about each other in a way that they haven't known before. Is that the theme there?
Exactly, exactly. And they're just you
Fun.
so many people say, "Wow, when I read this report, I've never felt so seen," sometimes in a scary way, right? But also in an
Yeah.
inspiring way. Like, wow, now I really I do see this about myself. And here's what I'm excited about in terms of growth. And here's what I just love about myself, right? Because it is a journey of self-love. And so that's what I
So
find that people really learn to love what's weird about them through this process.
yeah. Yeah, that's it. Love your weird. Okay, so the last thing I was going to ask you is this. So if I'm a company and I'm bringing you in, and I'm thinking of it like most companies do, kind of like the outcome, right? What's the outcome or like the why that I would hire you to come in specifically more for the keynote, right? So I know you do a lot of the consulting and stuff like that, but you're moving into this keynote space. You're going to come in for an event. You got an hour.
Yeah,
What is it that I would hire you to do in that hour for the organization?
absolutely. So one is to discover that you have some patterns in your life. And if you continue to try to deal with the escalating rate of change that we're dealing with this old pattern, it's almost like having an iPhone that's outdated and you can't run the current apps. That we must up
Like it
level.
doesn't even run.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
must up level that internal processing system in order to handle the level of change that we're dealing with. And so what I offer is a methodology to do that. one using music and the other through the path of the Enneagram. And they're both
I love that.
related. In fact, I talk about it in my book. They're just almost different paths to the same goal. But ultimately, what I'm
Nice. So
helping,
you're going to take us through a journey that we can walk away with some new mindset shifts and
absolutely.
some tools to be able to navigate change. So are you in change management, would you say?
I guess I would say that. I haven't in the past. I guess it's the internal
It's hard
change
to adopt
management.
that
Yeah.
term.
I haven't used that
I
term.
know. That's why I love Cassandra's change enthusiasm. It's like she freaking nailed it.
Yeah.
That they should just change management as an entire category of change
Right. Right.
enthusiasm, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, awesome. So, but that is the problem, right? We're all navigating this disruption, this change.
Yes.
It's happening at this new breakneck speed. The work I do is in the same space,
Yeah.
right? Mine is more about unlocking innovation and creativity and imagination for creating novel breakthroughs.
Hmm.
But it's the same thing of like, if they don't do the work that you're talking about, they're not going to be able to show up for that collective
For
ingenuity,
sure. For sure.
you
Because
know.
you've got this old thing, old playlist going on. So you
That's
can't
it.
meet the moment.
They don't even know that they're showing up
Yeah.
inauthentic. That's the wildest thing to me, is
Yeah.
the people that don't even realize that they're showing up inauthentic and think that they're showing up authentic. That was me for a long time. That's way harder than the people that know they're not being themselves because they feel like they have to be something else for the bar.
Yes.
That's actually that actually use more. You can do more with that for the person knows they're wearing a mask than the people that don't know they're wearing a
For
mask.
sure. And that's why I have to do sometimes 360 where they're getting feedback from all around. And then as well
Yeah.
do this assessment and work with them to see, it wouldn't be a blind spot if we could see it. Like that's why it's
Right.
called a blind spot,
Exactly.
right? We all have them.
Seriously.
Um,
Oh my gosh. Well, this is so fun. I am going to be on your podcast tomorrow,
yes.
which is exciting. This is awesome for you because you got it all warmed up. So now you can have some fun with it tomorrow. But thank you so much for being on the Love Your Weird podcast. I mean, this has been great. I hope that all the listeners enjoyed it as much as I did. And then obviously we can find you, your book where books
Yes.
are sold.
Right.
Is it
That's
susandrum.com?
right.
Is it
Susan
that
Drumm with
simple?
two M's. So, uh,
Nice. And you didn't have to buy a dash or anything.
yes,
That's great. Just susandrum.com.
SUSANDRUMM.com. I also have a little quiz on there you can take for free on what's your path for
Oh, okay.
leadership.
That's
And
fun.
it'll tie you to a specific chapter in the book that might resonate more with you. So,
I love that. Yeah, because I do tend to enjoy cliff notes and hacks and
yeah,
cheat codes when it comes to video games. So I'll make sure like that is so fun that you built that
yeah,
in. I might have to borrow that idea because quite frankly, like reading the entire book to get to that, that's fun that you did that. I love that
yeah.
you did that. Well, I'm looking forward to diving into that. And thank you so much for being on the show. This has been wonderful. And for those of everyone listening, thanks again for joining us for the Love Your Weird podcast. And until next time, have a wonderful day.